8 different players. We got to discuss, fellas, whether we should be panicking or expressing patience with them. We've got some high-profile names here. 3 first rounders that we're going to discuss today. The first of which is already on the screen. If you're watching over on YouTube. Garrett Wilson is our first panic meter discussion. Was not a wonderful week for Garrett Wilson. Drew 8 targets, but caught 5 of them for 41 yards. Fumbled along the way for 7.1 fantasy points on the week. It's been a pretty slow start for Garrett Wilson this year. Cameron, where are you at on the panic meter?
I'm getting a little more panicked because it's just like, when are we gonna see Garrett Wilson finally break out? Dude's had one top 12 finish since the start of 2023. I understand his quarterback situation, but if you were taking him as a first round pick, you were hoping by now we'd have seen a top 12 finish, when in fact we haven't even seen a top 24 finish from him. Yep. So I'm getting more panicked. I still believe in the talent. I still think him and Aaron Rodgers are going to figure it out. But I'm starting to move up that panic meter just a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you're watching over on YouTube, in previous weeks, it was just a nice little mark on the panic meter, kind of where I placed a consensus line. Now you get views of all 3 of us in our beautiful headshots of where we're all at on the panic meter. We're all kind of in a clump. Ty, you're a little bit less panicked than Cameron. So where are you at with Garrett Wilson this year?
I just have to remind myself that Nathaniel Hackett is the offensive coordinator here. And sometimes the guy is just going to try to outsmart literally himself. I mean, if you're gonna have Aaron Rodgers drop back for 42 pass attempts in what was a super wet and rainy game, I don't understand it. I get trying to spread the ball around, try to keep the defense guessing and stuff. That's just not the game for it, especially when you've got a tandem in Breece and Braylon Allen in the backfield. Now, the other thing is too, like, the run game wasn't exactly working for the Jets, but like, this is not the situation where you expect, we didn't expect Garrett Wilson to be a monster in this game, right? With Pat Surtain and stuff. I'm not so concerned, but through the first 4 games, I'm just having to continually remind myself, Nathaniel Hackett is the offensive coordinator and play caller here. And with Aaron Rodgers, not really, the Aaron Rodgers that we remember, you're a little concerned again, based on just where you drafted him at this year. But you kind of, if you didn't realize this was what you're bringing on with Garrett Wilson, I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah, I'm concerned in the sense that I haven't seen that elite week yet. I think there's a chance it comes against Minnesota. A team Aaron Rodgers is well familiar with over the granted entirely new coaching staff. So that you technically can't apply that knowledge there. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see the first big game from Garrett Wilson against Minnesota, who has just been leaking points to fantasy wide receivers this year. And even as you look further into the season, Buffalo could be a high scoring game. Pittsburgh, you don't love, but weeks 8 through 11, you get New England, which you'll get Gonzalez in that game. So maybe you're not as excited for that, but then you get Houston, Arizona, Indianapolis before the week 12 bye. So I think as you look down the road, there's room for optimism still with Garrett Wilson, but I agree. I think it is concerning in some sense that we haven't seen that elite performance yet. But when you look at the first 4 weeks of the season, you can almost write each week away and say, well, this was why, which almost makes it just as infuriating to be a Garrett Wilson manager. But you have to express patience here because Garrett Wilson is just too good of a talent, with Aaron Rodgers starting to turn it up now, who has been just dropping dimes recently. Before we get to the next player, though, unfortunately, fellas, our percentage has gone up on YouTube. We're back up to 93% of people who are watching our content and not yet subscribed. We're going to change that quick. So the 7% of you out there, thank you so much. We want you to join the 7%. If you like our content, if you like fantasy football content, we have 3 videos coming out for you every single week. The panic meter, trade targets, and a little bit of start sit action at the end of the week. You can hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications as well, so you'll be alerted when all of our newest episodes are up. We're going to have some trending or ending next week. Once the trade season is over, we're going to have some ranking discussions as well, some mid-season rankings. I mean, there's so much content that I'm stoked for coming up. So make sure you don't miss out. hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications if you are watching over on YouTube. We're going to stick with the same team for this next player, fellas, because I think it's worth having a conversation around Breece Hall. Again, Ty, you mentioned this with Garrett Wilson. The run game really wasn't working. 10 attempts, only 4 rushing yards. I couldn't even average half a yard yesterday, Breece Hall. Did catch 2 passes for 19 yards, finished the day with a disappointing 3.8 fantasy points. And Braylon Allen continues to be a thorn in his side. For every fantasy manager side at that as well. Cam, you're the least concerned around Breece Hall. Why is that?
I'm actually a little bit more concerned than what I told you just watching the film, because Breece just doesn't look overly explosive compared to, kind of where I thought he was going to be at. Now, I'm still not super concerned, but I think that running back 1 overall season, I just don't know if he's going to hit it with the emergence of Braylon Allen, with the way, he's only had 3 rushes on the year over 10 yards. He's only eclipsed 64 rushing yards. He hasn't eclipsed 64 rushing yards, yet on the season. So I think we're going to see, still a good Breece Hall. Obviously, the PPR upside is ridiculous. He's still seeing 5+ targets each week. It's just, I'm worried that we're going to kind of cap out at this 18, 19 points per game. When if you drafted him, you're saying, hey, this could be the 24 point per game guy that we were hoping for. This could be the next guy to break fantasy football. I just don't think you're going to get that anymore.
Well, in 18, 19, I mean, that's even starting to feel lofty if Braylon Allen is going to continue to be as efficient on the ground as he is, if he's going to continue to be involved in the passing attack, if he's going to continue to scarf touchdowns from Breece. I mean, that even feels lofty. So I'm with you. The RB1 overall season is definitely out of reach. Ty, on the meter, you are the most panicked out of all 3 of us. Why is that?
I think it's partially just more of an indictment on the offense as a whole. Kind of what we were talking about with Garrett Wilson, the fact that they're spreading this ball out to Allen Lazard and Mike Williams, that we've got Jeremy Ruckert getting involved, that we've got Tyler Conklin getting another 8 targets in this game as well. This Jets offense, right, whether it is because Aaron Rodgers is coming off of his Achilles or he's getting older, or if it's the Nathaniel Hackett component of things, this Jets offense is just not hitting, not meeting expectations at this point. So that Breece is going to get his on the ground. He's probably going to finish games with at least double-digit carries. He's going to get, 4 to 5 targets a game, maybe if not more. They just have not been putting the ball in the end zone. And when the hope for Breece even was when they do get closer to the red zone or to the end zone, it's kind of Breece Hall territory. That's not what it's been so far. We've seen Allen Lazard pop up. We've seen Garrett Wilson only score once. And now the emergence of Braylon Allen just kind of murkies things up even more. So again, it's not so much on Breece. It's really just the offense as a whole not meeting expectations, and it's really impacting every single one of them.
Yeah, I will say, in terms of red zone touches, Breece did have 3 to Braylon Allen's 0 this last week. So there is that where he's at least still getting the goal line work in that capacity ahead of Braylon Allen. But again, you're starting to see other options leak in then. It's not just Breece Hall, it's Allen Lazard and the rest of the supporting cast as well. I'm looking forward to the week 6 matchup in Buffalo after they just got torn apart by Derrick Henry. I think you're going to see the Jets hopefully establish the run in that game. So Breece Hall is just too good of a talent to overreact on, but there is more starting to factor into his situation here that is drawing more and more concern from us, but we're still sitting around, the 25 to 30 range, the 20 to 30 range here on the panic meter. So none of us are overreacting to this, but all of us are continuing to take notes and collect the data as the week goes on for this New York Jets offense. Let's flip teams now. This is a guy who was drafted in the first round, not this year, but last year. Patrick Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, I think he has to be on this episode after you lose Rashee Rice for what we're anticipating is going to be the rest of the season. Was that officially confirmed today at all? I never saw a report on that.
It has not been. They came out and said we're not going to know till tomorrow. So people are speculating. Maybe there was no ligament damage. Maybe we'll see him, but it still sounds like it's going to be multiple weeks at a minimum, but more than likely out for the season. Should know more tomorrow or Tuesday, I guess, the day you guys are watching this.
Right. So Patrick Mahomes rightfully finds his way onto this list because at this point, it has been a disappointing start to his 2024 campaign, a season where a lot of people, with the addition of Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice entering his second year, the signing of Hollywood Brown this offseason, you still have Travis Kelce, still a very solid offensive line, or projected to be a very solid offensive line. Isaiah Pacheco in the backfield. I mean, the abundance of riches this offense had at the start of the season, we were expecting an MVP season again from Patrick Mahomes, a 40-plus touchdown season. We're not going to get close to that, I fear, because we've lost over half of those offensive weapons, and we're left with Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy, and, the land of misfit toys, basically. So, Cameron, you're the least panicked, but you're still sitting right around that 50% range. Why is that? Why are you not totally red alert on Mahomes yet?
Because he's Patrick Mahomes is the only reason.
That's the
right.
answer.
I mean,
right.
he's the best quarterback in the NFL. And he's got probably the best play caller in the NFL. So if anybody's going to turn it around, it's Mahomes and Andy Reid. And we saw him start off hot at the beginning of last season. So I think they can go on stretches, right? And if the stretch hits at the right time, you're feeling pretty good. But at the same time, we're all over 50%. You lose Rashee Rice, who's averaging 8 receptions, 10 targets, 96 yards, and 0.6 touchdowns per game so far this season. That's going to hurt your team no matter who you are, especially when he has literally been your only option until this last week when Travis Kelce decided to show up. So, yeah, it's been a long time since we've really seen some Mahomes magic in the regular season, which feels funny because they keep winning. So it's like, who really cares? From their perspective, like, we're going to keep doing this because we keep winning. But yeah, from a fan's perspective, it's definitely been disappointing, and it's getting worrisome that we're just not going to see that high end Mahomes at all the rest of the season.
The only saving grace I think there potentially is with the loss of a guy like Rashee Rice is that it's probably going to force Mahomes, dare I say, to try and stretch the field more. Either Xavier Worthy needs to become a more completely rounded wide receiver than a straight line guy, than a downfield field stretcher. Because, we saw it in this game. You put Xavier Worthy on the outside, you ask the dude to run a sprint straight down the field, Mahomes will drop it. I saw it was like an air yard completion of over 60 yards or something. It was absolutely insane. So I'm starting to wonder if Xavier Worthy is your only dude on the outside, we get more field stretching opportunities to take, the top off this too high shell covers that defenses are running this year. That's like my saving grace, where we get a little more boom bust rather than complete floor from the Kansas City Chiefs. If you pick up what I'm saying here, Ty, you're the most panicked though. And I think you're not wrong for being as panicked as you are on the panic meter.
When you look at who he's throwing to, it's like Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce. But then when you're banking on Justin Watson and Juju Smith-Schuster and Sky Moore and Mecole Hardman, who can't catch.
Oh my gosh.
Just cannot. Then you look at upcoming opponents. You've got New Orleans, you've got San Francisco and Denver, who are all bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks this year. That you do have some nice matchups with like Vegas and Tampa, but let's not take Vegas as like this light opponent, because it was this exact same Vegas team last year that went into Kansas City and beat them. That made Mahomes look pretty ordinary from his usual special play. So I not a fan right now of what the Chiefs are doing. We brought up, I think it was Kelce, the first time that we started talking about tight ends on these kind of episodes. This Kansas City offense is still not hitting a stride at all. And now you've lost Pacheco, you've lost Rashee Rice, and we're now going to hope that they're going to figure it out now with those guys out. I think there's more working against Mahomes here. And I know this isn't a trade episode, but man, if you can move him while the name value is still there, which he will always have, but I'm just saying when Kansas City is still winning, at least I would try to move Mahomes for a better quarterback option.
Well, and I think you can make that application here, because with where you're at on the panic meter, I think as you start to dip into that orange range, you start exploring options with these players, right? If you're watching over on YouTube, the green end of the meter, the low end of the meter, is definitely the like, don't panic, don't overthink this, like sit tight on these guys. Yellow is like, all right, we're collecting the data here. I'm testing the waters a little bit, and the orange and red is much more the like action needs to be taken in some capacity. And I think that's kind of where Cameron, you and I are kind of teetering into that orange, but Ty, you are very clearly like, you know what, I'm exploring options if I have them because I don't think it's just going to be fixed instantly for Patrick Mahomes. And I think that's a great way to look at these episodes when we try and give you all a panic meter. It's not ditch these guys immediately because we're over 50%. It's like it is a spectrum that we're truly talking about these players on. And you're 100% right with the lack of weapons this team has. I don't think we can sit here and say like, yep, the addition is subtraction. Like I don't think that's what's going to happen here, despite, like you said, Cameron, Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL. If anyone can figure it out, it's him. But the odds are stacked against him here by the looks of it.
I will say in 2022, when he had 5,200 yards and 41 touchdowns, his 5 leading receivers were Travis Kelce, who obviously is different, right? He had 110 receptions, 1,300 yards. You don't have that right now of Travis Kelce. So that is the biggest downfall. But then it's Juju Smith-Schuster, MVS, Jerick McKinnon, and Justin Watson. Yeah. Right. That was your 5 leading receivers. So he can do it with limited talent. And in that season, Pacheco only had 800 yards. But I do understand it is different this year than it is in 2022.
And this is why we say, like, you can't just throw in the towel on a guy like Patrick Mahomes, because you know he can spin it with whoever is willing to catch the football, who's ever willing to put their hands on it and haul it passing for him. He'll make it work. But again, like we said, it doesn't seem like addition by subtraction here is the proper method for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Ty's sitting on something. Ty's sitting on something right now. Ty looks like he's got a nail in the coffin right now.
Oh my word! Can I recklessly speculate here?
I would love it.
I'm glad you prefaced it with this. So yes, now you can recklessly speculate.
Who is the one player that has floated around fantasy football circles today about being a really easy person or player to move at the trade deadline?
Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper is going to be a Chief, and they're going to run it back. They're going to win a 3rd Super Bowl in a row. That's exactly how this is going to work. So all of this, take it with a grain of salt, because you know it's just going to happen at this point.
I mean, there's been some wild names being thrown out there today, though. I mean, you got Amari Cooper. Devontae Adams is always swirling out there. I think his hamstring's a little extra sore today. I think he woke up with a little bit of extra tightness this morning in that hamstring. Deontay Johnson, like, I've heard his name speculated. I'm like, that seems pretty crazy. I don't think that
help my guys, my fourth
that indeed it would. I think the other name that I think I've seen it floated out there, but not as frequently. I wouldn't be surprised if DeAndre Hopkins is a name the Chiefs pursue as well. Unhealthy, obviously, but is there a world where they take on his contract and find a way to make the money work? If we're throwing out Deontay Johnson, we may as well throw out DeAndre Hopkins. But anyways, but these are the reasons why you don't just throw out Patrick Mahomes because he's having a bad stretch, right? Not only is he the best quarterback in football, but there's a multitude of ways in which this can still go right for him at the same time. Yeah. Let's move on to running backs again here, fellas. Let's talk about Rhamondre Stevenson. He had a hot start to the season this past week, 13 attempts, 43 yards. Did catch 4 passes, 8.2 fantasy points on the day, though. This New England Patriots is just so golly. They're the offense I don't want to watch at all this year. I can't stand watching their offense. Not because it's inherently bad. It's because I'm kind of tired of watching Jacoby Brissett play quarterback for this team. Look, we're all hovering right around 50% on the panic meter. I'll start there. Ty, you're the most panicked. Again, it's by like 10% here, obviously. But where are you at with Rhamondre Stevenson? What do you do with him going forward? What's going right? What's going wrong?
Yeah, I try to keep my judgment as relative as possible, because I don't think any three of us were like, hey, like, we're pounding the table for Rhamondre Stevenson this year. So like, we're not totally shocked that this New England offense is not producing at all right now, because again, that's what we expected. But
I was anti-Rhamondre Stevenson. I'll plant my flag on that. I was the one who came out that I was anti-Rhamondre.
Yeah, you're running back 27. So I'll do that one.
But there was some hope or optimism at the beginning of the year because the guy had 25 carries and 21 carries in back-to-back games. And you're like, well, they're going to rely on Rhamondre as much as they are. Like, maybe there's something there. Then he gets hurt in week 3 and doesn't come back. And then he gets 13 carries in a blowout loss to the Niners. I think it ultimately just comes back to, like, do you want to be a part of a Jacoby Brissett-led Patriots offense? Do you want a piece of that?
No.
Yes, Lucas. No, I do not. There really is no hope. Like, I think the discussion that we need to really have is, like, how much better does it get when Drake May comes in? Because it feels like that's where we're going, that at some point in the year, Drake May is going to take over a quarterback. But the question is, like, how much better does it get when he takes over? I don't think it really takes, it's not going to be a, giant leap in production for the offense as a whole. So yeah, like you know that Rhamondre is going to be the workhorse for this offense. It's just not going to be anything great. So it's like, maybe you try to flip him now, just while people are like, while it's still early enough in the season. But I fear that, like, now that we've gotten 2 weeks of just kind of a very, very bad or mediocre week from the guy, that no one's going to be interested.
Rhamondre Stevenson is just Rachaad White on a worse offense with a less intimidating backup. That's where I'm at,
brother.
You said it.
That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. I mean, it's not like this Patriots offensive line has been stellar. They've been fine. They've been better than I expected. But again, if this is what it's going to be for Rhamondre Stevenson, where he's getting 45 yards on the ground and catches 4 passes on the afternoon for another, 8 yards or 20 yards, that's fine. You can give me 10 points on the week, but what's that going to give me? A running back 26, 27 finish? Like, I'm not overly excited about that. Cameron, you have anything you want to add about Rhamondre Stevenson here?
Yeah, just going off what Ty said, he's just 100% game dependent, right? Those first 2 games, they won, and then they went to overtime and like Ty said, 46 carries between the two, 201 rushing yards. Last 2 weeks, they've gotten blown out, 19 carries for 66 yards. He's playing about 50% of snaps in those last 2 games compared to 78 and 72 in the first 2 games. So if you think it's going to be a good game script, which they maybe have 2 more games left of good game scripts, then you can, he's a good start. Otherwise, you got to really hope that PPR upside pays off.
Let's take a quick break. We'll hear from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. We'll be back with 4 more players and debate whether you should be panicking or express some patience with them. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We've got 4 more names to discuss here. We've already talked about Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Patrick Mahomes, and Rhamondre Stevenson. We're going to stick with the running back here position, fellas. And I don't know if this is a name people expected us to talk about, but I think it's worth talking about just based off of the usage in some of the comments recently. Bijan Robinson is a peculiar name. Only 7 attempts for 28 yards this past week against the New Orleans Saints. Still caught 4 passes. Totaled 11.4 fantasy points on the day. But again, you didn't draft Bijan Robinson in the first round to give you 11.4 fantasy points. You drafted Bijan Robinson with the hope that he becomes the Kyron Williams kind of guy in Atlanta, that the words of the coaching staff wanting to give him a CMC-sized role or to utilize him in a CMC way in Atlanta. Like, that's what you're drafting Breece Hall with, some people as high as the 4th, 5th overall pick with. I was never totally on board with that. I figured Tyler Algier would still have a role here. And after this week, Tyler Algier still clearly has a role here despite his week 1 usage. We're all still relatively low on the panic meter. Cameron, I'll start with you. Is this just simply because Bijan is a first round pick and he hasn't given us a single digit point week yet? Or are we actually still confident, Bijan can still return top 3 numbers this year?
This offense has just been trying to figure it out, with Kirk Cousins, having him get fully back healthy. That week 1, we were panicked on Kirk because it was like, holy cow, can he even throw the ball anymore? Now it's there. This last week, they scored 2 defensive touchdowns to stay in the game. The offense didn't look quite right. But Bijan is still unbelievably talented. Should have had a receiving touchdown in this game, but there was a really soft holding call that, brought it back. So I don't know. I think he's going to have enough. Obviously, this last week, the snap counts were a little worrisome. Like he brought up, he had been at 89, 75, 82. And then this last week, all of a sudden, it's 64% snap share compared to, Tyler Algier at 38%. So that is a little more worrisome. That's why I think I'm moving up a little bit more. But I think you got to just wait on Bijan because he's a talented enough running back that he's going to continue to put up fantasy points.
Ty, you're sitting right around the 35% range on the meter. Give me your thoughts around Bijan Robinson here and his potential role in this offense going forward.
So I want to start with the CMC quote that we got earlier this year. Yeah, you can try to get him the workload, but I think a lot of people just kind of assumed that it would be a CMC production.
Right.
That's not what we're going to get this year. Atlanta is not San Francisco. Atlanta is not the Rams, right? With Kyron Williams, all that kind of stuff. So that being said, I do think that there are some brighter days ahead for Bijan that I think as this offense continues to kind of gel and come together a bit, that we are going to see the top 5 finishes from Bijan. The thing that does concern me the most, though, is when you take a look at like the advanced metrics, the underlying metrics. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is like Bucky Irving and Rachaad White 2.0, but for the same reason why Bucky Irving is getting on the field with Rachaad White, almost feels like that's the reason why Algier is getting on the field, because according to Nathan Yonke of Pro Football Focus, Algier has a higher first down rate, yards per carry, yards after contact per attempt, an avoided tackle rate, and more carries of 10 or more yards on 30 less carries.
Yeah.
Like Algier, when he's on the field, he's getting the ball. So I'm not going to sit here and say like, hey, we need to have the Rachaad White level of panic on Bijan. But again, the potential dream role that we've been wanting for Bijan, you hope that it's going to come in future weeks, because at this point, it's kind of gone backwards because he's gone 23 touches in week 1 to 18 touches in week 2 and 3 to 11 touches in week 4.
I've seen some people mention in comments, and again, this is like comments on social media, not from like totally 100% reputable fantasy analysts, but people have been like, oh, have we overrated Bijan? Is he actually an over-touted prospect? Were we too mature calling him generational? I'm like, no, because if you actually watch the film, Bijan's a freakishly good football player. Like, I think we were all correct on our scouting reports on Bijan Robinson. The thing I'm curious about is, why is Zach Robinson trying to run an offense through Darnell Mooney and Tyler Algier? Like, that's like, and I get that's like hyperbole, right? He's not trying to actually do that, but when you're giving Tyler Algier so much early down work, when I don't know, it seems like, unless if the NFL is seeing something different than me, like to me, Bijan Robinson is just a better football player than Tyler Algier. But then when you're also trying to feed Darnell Mooney, with Drake London there as your primary, Kyle Pitts there as your primary guy, I question. I think we're seeing growing pains. That's what I'm getting to. I think we're seeing a lot of growing pains with all these new additions in terms of coaching staff, in terms of quarterback. How are these roles all going to be flushed out? I think we're just seeing growing pains. So I'm not ready to hit the panic button whatsoever on Bijan Robinson. But again, very similar to Breece Hall, I'm starting to collect more and more data, and I'm starting to wonder if this is going to be the normal for Bijan, where he's not going to have week 1 usage like he did every single week. And not that I was expecting that, but the fact that, again, those stats you listed high are so important. The first down rate, the yards per carry, the yards after contact per attempt. I mean, those are the kind of things that will keep Tyler Algier on the field. And I'm curious to see how that impacts Bijan's role here for the rest of the season. We'll pivot positions here, fellas. We'll talk about another wide receiver now. This is a guy we talked about in our starts episode last week, albeit when we recorded that episode, it seemed unlikely that both Debo and Kittle were going to play. Wouldn't you know, both were on the field last week. Aiyuk, 2 receptions, 48 yards on 5 targets, only 6.8 fantasy points. He has yet to hit double-digit fantasy points in a single game this year. Ty, you are the most panicked. You're hovering right around that 60% range on the panic meter. What are you doing with Brandon Aiyuk moving forward? Is there still room for a bounce back in your mind?
I think Aiyuk is a great buy low target right now. The problem is with Kittle and Debo back in the mix, it feels like it's just going to take even longer now for Aiyuk to kind of finally have his, trademark performance where it's 6 catches, 90 yards and a touchdown, right? Like, just because now the situation is a little more muddier. Now, we probably would have had this. I would have made that exact same point next week had Debo and Kittle not played. But the fact that Aiyuk is still, it's not necessarily that he hasn't gotten back into the mold, into game shape or anything like that. This San Francisco offense is clearly built on the run and play action, and it's Debo and Kittle. Aiyuk feels like a third fiddle here. So I think, again, Aiyuk could still have his trademark games down the road. It just feels a little murkier. I think that's the best way to say it.
I will say, train totally left the station. Cameron, give me your thoughts on Brandon Aiyuk while I recollect my thoughts here. The train totally left the station. You and I are much closer to 50%, though.
Yeah, he just, even if we look at last year, he started the season 33 points against Pittsburgh, then 7, then he missed a week, then 29, 11, 10, 15. So he had a couple weeks in there that weren't great. And I think, him coming in, missing training camp like Ty talked about, he didn't get those explosive weeks this week because when he had 32 points, he was 8 receptions on 8 targets for 120 yards and 2 yards. When he had 20 points, 6 receptions on 6 targets for 148 yards. So he was just unreal efficiency in the beginning of the season, before he was seeing more and more targets like he saw later on. And I think right now we're just not getting that same efficiency because he missed that beginning of training camp. And that's what he's going to need in this offense. That's what we said coming in when you have Debo, when you have Kittle, when you see 8 targets, you got to catch 7 of them. You have to have 100 yards, right? If you want to perform in this offense, that's just what you need. And this offense is built so that they can do that. It's just when Aiyuk hasn't had that time with Purdy in camp, when he's not fully conditioned coming in, then you start to miss a couple of these and you see a start like we've had.
I will say, this is what I was going to say prior to. I do think Christian Gonzalez needs some more respect put on his name. He has been phenomenal this year. He's not at the Pat Surtain or Sauce Gardner level yet, but I mean, he is proving to be a very, very solid corner in the NFL and has done a phenomenal job this year. So when you draw Sauce Gardner and Christian Gonzalez in 2 of your first 4 matchups, it makes the sting a little bit less. But then when you see he's also played the Rams and the Vikings, who have just leaked points to wide receivers this year, that's when you're like, all right, I'm starting to get a bit more concerned here. Is this offense truly running through you after your contract? Are you the alpha here? Do you need to step up? Do they need to be getting you the football more, or should you be demanding the football more? Or are you happy to just have your money, go out and stay in shape and let Debo and Kittle run the show? I mean, that's kind of where we're at. So I think there is room for a bounce back here. But again, this is something we were all predicting. The efficiency is going to come down this year. We were screaming that from the mountaintops. We love Aiyuk, the player, but you don't just repeat 18.1 yards per reception in back-to-back seasons. Unless if Brandon Aiyuk was the only option here, then you could maybe make a case for it. But you just don't see that. So this is something we're anticipating, something we are definitely keeping in mind. If you're wondering, though, if you should be looking to buy Brandon Aiyuk, if you have Brandon Aiyuk and you're potentially panicked on him, you want to trade him, you can join our Discord. It's a great place where you can go and ask your fantasy football questions. You can join that down in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to. There's start sit advice there. Maybe you're like, I don't trust Brandon Aiyuk. Who should I be playing over him? You can drop your start sit question there. You can drop your trade advice there. You can drop in the general chat what other people actually think about Brandon Aiyuk. We got about 22 100 members sitting over there. They are blowing it up daily. Really appreciative of those of you who join our Discord to help make our community even stronger than it already is. So you can always ask your start set questions, your trade questions, your waiver questions over there. Link is down in the description. The podcast you are listening to, wherever you are listening to it at. Travis Etienne is the next name we're going to talk about. A little bit of an interesting week. Started the game, left for a bit, came back, dealing with a shoulder injury. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. 11 attempts for 50 yards, caught one pass in this game for 10 yards, totaled 7 fantasy points on the day. We're all not quite at that 50% mark, but Cam, you and Ty are relatively in the same spot, hovering right around 40-ish percentage or so. Why is that for you?
It's just we're seeing more Tank Bigsby than I think any of us really considered possible during this season, right? We just didn't see that coming after what happened last year. Last year was completely the Travis Etienne show, and this year they've really had a split. The receiving work is still his. He still looks good on the ground, right? It's not like the Rashad White where he's looking so bad that it's like, well, yeah, you have to put Bucky Irving out there because Rashad White just can't do anything. Etienne looks good. It's just, is he going to be able to perform on this team without getting the insane volume he had last year? And obviously, as of right now, he's not to the level that you drafted him at. So that's where the concern is can he put it together enough that not seeing more than 13 attempts in a game, he'll be okay fantasy wise. That's the worry with him right now.
What's the case for you, Ty? 'Cause you're sitting right at the same percentage.
I think when you look at ETN and any of the other weapons on this team, it's not smart to sit and say like, well, if Doug Peterson gets fired, maybe there's some optimism there, because Press Taylor is still there, and most of the offensive struggles have come when he's been the play caller. So I don't know like how much better it can get for ETN. But that being said, like, that he's going to be on the field. He feels like another Rhamondre of sorts, just in a slightly better offense. Like, that he's going to be on the field. He's going to get the lead, majority share of carries. He's going to be involved in the receiving game. You're just going to have to take the bad weeks with the good weeks, and I just don't think there are going to be that many good weeks.
I think this is something we were all fearful of coming into the season, where his front half of the season last year was so touchdown heavy that when he stopped scoring them in the second half of the season, you felt it on such a dramatic level. They're like, wait, what happened to my steal of the draft? What happened to my top 3 running back? Granted, he still finished as a top 3 back last year, but this is something, admittedly, I was a little bit fearful of coming into the season of what does it look like if ETN is only a 17, 18 touch per game kind of guy, and he only scores 7 touchdowns this year instead of the abundance that he scored last year. We're seeing that kind of come to fruition, except the fact is Tank Bigsby is playing a much larger role. Now we're only getting 12 rush attempts, 13 rush attempts, 11 rush attempts in back-to-back games. We're getting 3 targets, 6 targets in week 3, but then back down to 2 last week. So I think ETN's going to continue to need to be involved in this passing attack, rack up a few extra PPR points to provide him a little bit more of a floor. But man, if this Jaguars offense isn't scoring, if we're starting to see Brian Thomas get utilized in the red zone more, had a beautiful press man coverage in the red zone that he beat for a touchdown. I'm losing optimism in Travis Etienne, but at the same time, I haven't totally lost hope yet, because I think I still need to see it, another 2 weeks first of this, running back 25 to 35 production before I'm like, okay, like the guy you draft in the second round is not the guy you actually drafted in the second round. Last name on our list here, fellas. We're going to get down there a little bit further on the draft board now. Zay Flowers is a fascinating name. I think the Baltimore Ravens are just a fascinating team to talk about in general right now. Only 2 targets, caught one of them for 10 yards on Sunday Night Football, 2 fantasy points on the day. Back-to-back weeks now where Zay Flowers has only given you 1 reception, single-digit fantasy points. Outside of week 2 where he gave you 22 fantasy points. The Ravens are They have a plan and they're just executing it. And it doesn't matter. It's a different game plan every week. Except they're executing it extremely well, unlike the Chicago Bears, because Shane Waldron is just doing things that no offensive coordinator should even be bothering trying to attempt with a rookie quarterback. I'll just leave it at that. It's going to be so hit or miss with Zay Flowers. And this is exactly what we got last year, and the problem hasn't been solved. So, Cameron, you're surprisingly only at 50%. I'm the most panicked on Zay Flowers out of the three of us, but you're sitting right around 50% still. Why is that?
Because he was my wide receiver 37 coming into the season, so I had
Your
no
expectations were already too low
for him at all. The issue is, like you said, Ravens know what they want to do. They want to run the ball. They have had 33 pass attempts over the last 2 weeks combined. 10 teams had 33 or more pass attempts this last week than the Ravens have had over the last 2 weeks combined. And when you're winning like they are, you're not going to stop. The Ravens aren't going to go, you know what would be good? If we did some more play action, right? If we just took the ball out of Derrick Henry's hands. No, they're going to keep running the ball right now. And they play Cincinnati, Washington, Tampa Bay, Cleveland, Denver, Cincinnati. They're going to look to run the ball nonstop over these next 6 weeks. And, Cincinnati, Washington, Denver, they are going to easily do it. Tampa Bay, Cleveland, they're going to be able to because the Cleveland offense will be able to get off the field. And Tampa Bay, they've been red hot. So they're going to want to keep Baker off the field as much as possible. So in every situation, they want to run the ball. That's what they want to do. And so it's just, if Zay Flowers' ADOT is as low as it has been, and he's not seeing the targets, it's the same argument we had with Michael Pittman last week, or, talking through Anthony Richardson about Michael Pittman. It's just, I would be worried if I had Zay Flowers.
Yeah, it makes sense that you're that low because your expectations were already low. I think a lot of people, I was hoping we'd start to see a little bit more of an alpha emergence for Zay Flowers. Not that I think he could be a complete alpha in an offense, but considering it's Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar in this wide receiver room, I was hoping Zay Flowers would start to emerge a little bit more. But again, once the Ravens are committed to their game plan, they're committed to their game plan, and it does appear that Derrick Henry is the way here for the foreseeable future. Ty, would you agree with that statement? You and I are a little bit closer on the panic meter. You're right around 60%. Do you echo those same sentiments?
Yeah, I this Baltimore team, I think it's the Lamar Derrick Henry show. I think that's just the simplest way to put it. They are not going to get off of that. Now it's a matter of how efficient can they be, but it's going to be one of those two guys. And Zay Flowers can, he'll have the odd 7 target game where he catches 5 or 6 of them, and maybe he finds the end zone. But that's what we're looking at with Zay Flowers right now. He's got to score to have any kind of relevancy, to have any kind of, if you're really going to put him in your starting lineup, you have to have a touchdown, anytime touchdown prop or something also on the line, because that's all that you've got going with Zay Flowers. So I think the simplest way to put it for me is just that, I don't want to deal with any more Ravens pass catchers. It's way too complicated to figure out. Let's just move on. I'm done talking about Ravens pass catchers.
Yeah, I'm adding them to. So I've started accumulating a list of teams where you're basically just playing roulette with them every week, and not the kind where you just toss a ball onto a table and you guess which number. You are playing Russian roulette with these players, right? It is like one in the chamber, take a guess, lose. And you're gonna lose. It's the Patriots. You can't guess with the Patriots. It's the Rams right now because you can't guess if it's Demarcus Robinson, if it's Tutu Atwell, or Jordan Whittington. And it's the Ravens now because Mark Andrews can't be trusted. Zay Flowers might have a fine week. Is it going to be Rashad Bateman that catches a touchdown this week? Is it Nelson Aguilar? I mean, who knows at this point, right? So I find it extremely hard to trust Zay Flowers, which is why I'm probably the highest on the panic meter. And, frankly, next time he has a big game, see ya, bye. I'm looking to ship you ASAP. Like that, he is going to be the ultimate sell high the next time he puts up, 16, 17 fantasy points in a game.
Yeah, I just tweeted out this morning. The Ravens put up 35 or 35 points and 470 yards. Their wide receivers and tight ends combined for 5 catches for 69 yards. That's it. They put up 35 points and 470 yards, and their wide receivers and tight ends combined for less than 70 yards. It's just ridiculous what this team is doing right now.
If you want to see more of Cameron's tweets, he's been putting out some fun film, some fun stats out there. You can follow him, Camlaw FFF over there. I am at Lucas Wenzel, Tyler_Plath. You want to follow Tyler as well. You can follow the Fellas socials as well. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. Make sure you subscribe here. We got 3 podcasts coming out for you every single week. Turn on those notifications so you know when they're up. If you want our short form content as well, we post 60-second shorts every single day that are different from our podcast content. You can follow us over on those socials as well, or you can follow Fantasy Football Fellas Shorts on YouTube. I think we'll sign off there, fellas. You two will be back next week tomorrow with the trade videos. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Got some fun names we're going to talk about there. And then we'll do another 16 to 24 players who will change your fantasy football outcome in week 4. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you know when those episodes come out. We'll see you all next time. Deuces.
Deuces.